Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
By now, you've probably already heard about all of the wonders of apple cider vinegar. Today, I want to talk about some detailed science behind apple cider vinegar so you really understand medicinally why it would be advantageous and perhaps beneficial for you to incorporate into a daily routine. I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and on today's episode, I am going to be telling you all about apple cider vinegar. So what we know about apple cider vinegar, we can go all the way back to Hippocrates and even actually before that and see how vinegar was kind of considered this medicinal, wonderful discovery that had all of these many different purposes. Now, what exactly is vinegar? Vinegar comes from the French meaning sour wine, and it can be made from almost any fermentable carbohydrate source. So this is why apples are a really great way for us to obtain the vinegar from that. Now, what's the most beneficial is when we look at the acetic acid called acetobacter, which converts the alcohol into acetic acid. Now, this is important because when we talk about fermentation, we talk about the microbiome, we know that oftentimes our diets are not high enough when it comes to good fermentable sourced foods. And we know that our little healthy bacteria certainly appreciate that fermented food. So now we go back, we look once again at this long fermentation process that can occur when we're looking at apple cider vinegar. And when people are using it in its liquid form, then you always want to be utilizing the type that has what is known as the mother in it. And that has that high amount of yeast and acetic acid bacteria. So it's very beneficial when we talk about our immune system, keeping in mind that a good 70% of the immune system is located within the intestines. So the vinegar itself helps those healthy bacteria, those organisms, naturally have a feeding source, which can help to optimize our overall immune system. So really very important. But then we think, okay, this is coming from apples. Well, we know apples in and of themselves have all of these wonderful antioxidants and vitamins and minerals along with it. So by having the vinegar being sourced from an apple, we know that we are going to be obtaining that as well. So you can look at the history and look at the science of vinegar. And as I stated, it goes all the way back to Hippocrates. So we're talking, around 400 BC is when, and Hippocrates, if you don't know, is the father of modern medicine. Kind of interesting that you think all the way back to the time of BC, and we're talking about the father of modern medicine. But we know that Hippocrates used to recommend that vinegar preparations be utilized for cleaning certain wounds, so different ulcerations, as well as for people who had respiratory illnesses. So this is something that we know has been shown all the way back to the time of Hippocrates to be beneficial. Then you start to look at the recent scientific investigations that have clearly demonstrated that the vinegar itself has many different properties, including antimicrobial properties. We know that it can be non-toxic when we are using it in the appropriate fashion in terms of impeding the growth of harmful strains of bacteria, such as E. coli. So this is why you see the science that builds and builds and builds to show just how advantageous this can actually be. Now, what has gained a lot of attention as of recently is, can apple cider vinegar be beneficial in the setting of weight loss? So I'm going to talk about some studies that indicate just that. It shows that when people are utilizing apple cider vinegar in terms of supplementation, that this may help to promote healthy thermogenesis, which is the natural fat burning. So anytime people are looking for a way to, cut down on a few pounds, they oftentimes want to look to something that's natural. So we can look at apple cider vinegar as being a really nice option. But we also know that apple cider vinegar has been widely studied beyond that of the immune system, beyond that of weight loss. We have seen its benefits when it comes to cardiovascular support and having a unique ability to really hone in on a lot of the oxidative stress as well as inflammation. So it's really quite interesting to see it trend through the years in the way that it has been looked at. Now, here's another little fun fact about apple cider vinegar. When we think about weight loss, oftentimes what is occurring is we're having a dysregulation in terms of proper cortisol balance. And oftentimes this can be brought on by having insulin imbalance. We're talking about blood glucose. So that whole endocrine pathway where we're thinking about glucose, insulin, and cortisol. So they have shown via scientific studies that the apple cider vinegar actually promotes this anti-glycemic effect, meaning it has this ability to help to keep blood glucose in a healthy range, which is certainly very important for those who are trying to achieve healthy weight loss. So this is why you see more and more information coming out about all of the wonders of apple cider vinegar. So there's reasons why, and the science certainly supports that. So if we can help to better regulate our glycemic index, if we can help to better regulate the rate at which glucose is rising and that delayed response of insulin, which can then bring on an issue with an imbalance with cortisol, which can then lead to issues with excessive weight gain. This is why in settings of metabolic syndrome, for example, they have been able to indicate that apple cider vinegar actually can help not only in the support of healthy weight loss, but also for the cardiovascular benefits to that as well. So a lot of different ways in which this was studied. Now, here was an interesting study where they were looking at the impact of apple cider vinegar in those who had high levels of glucose, high insulin. So basically we're talking about someone with like metabolic syndrome. And they were having them eat certain foods, and then they incorporated in apple cider vinegar. And they were looking for not only the blood glucose levels, but what they found through this was a normalization in the satiety. So for those who were more prone to having those cravings for food in the middle of the afternoon, they found that those in the test group that were given apple cider vinegar had not only the benefit of balancing that blood glucose, but they also had a lessened effect of having these hunger episodes where you just get these insatiable cravings. So they thought, oh, that's really quite interesting. So it shows you how much of an impact that apple cider vinegar is actually having on the regulation of your blood glucose and that insulin regulation. So at the end of the day, that can be very beneficial when you think about trying to have healthy weight loss. So that's certainly a wonderful thing. So we think, okay, so it's beneficial for heart health, it's beneficial for the immune system, it has those wonderful fermentations that allow those bacteria to naturally thrive and survive and help to bolster up our immune defenses. We now know that it helps in terms of that promotion of cutting those cravings. We know that it can be beneficial for regulation of blood glucose, but let's talk about specific studies when it comes to being able to lose weight. So this is where a lot of the research is really kind of taken off, because there's always something out there where people say this is the best thing for weight loss. Now, keep in mind, to have healthy weight loss, you first need to determine the reason as to why it is that you are putting on weight. You have to look at underlying factors. Is there thyroid dysfunction occurring? And this can even be in the setting of subclinical hypothyroidism, meaning that your thyroid function tests come back and they appear to be in range, but maybe that's not the right range for you. So it may still be impacting your overall metabolic rate. We have to look at underlying chronic disease states. If someone is a diabetic, for example, we have to consider genetics in all of this. If someone has a genetic variant or a mutation, as they used to call it, but it's a variant, and this may be a reason as to the way that your body is storing fat or the way that your body is processing fats from your diet. Is it coming down to the foods that you're choosing, the timing of which you're eating? There's so many different factors that can come into play when we're talking about weight gain. And then when we look at trying to do healthy weight loss, we never want to do crash diets. We want to make sure that what we are doing is going to be effective, but it is also going to last. So this is hence where your apple cider vinegar can come into play. We can look at a study that was published in the Journal of Medicinal Foods talking about metabolic syndrome and how this has very serious consequences, especially when we're talking about the cardiovascular system. We look at high blood pressure when we're talking about the impact of elevated cholesterol. We look at glucose issues, so the elevation of blood glucose, which we know can damage the blood vessels themselves. Oftentimes when we think about blood sugar, we don't think about the cardiovascular implications to that. So knowing what we know now, we know that dietary supplementation with certain antioxidants can be very beneficial. So in this particular study, they wanted to see if a daily dosage of apple cider vinegar would indeed impact the cardiovascular risk factors that are associated with metabolic syndrome. So they're looking at the total cholesterol, looking at those triglyceride levels, looking at the bad cholesterol, which is your LDL, the low density lipoproteins, looking at the VLDL, the very low density lipoproteins. And they wanted to see if the apple cider vinegar would have an impact on those specific indices. They found that after 6 weeks, indeed, it was the apple cider vinegar that helped in terms of the normalization of all of these biochemical markers. And they found that the metabolic changes were really quite astonishing. So this is why people look at apple cider vinegar and go, maybe this is something that I should incorporate into my routine. It's going to help in terms of easing inflammation in the body. It's fending off oxidative stress. It's supporting those gut microbes. So when we talk about our microbiome, so we're supporting the immune system. And when we support the immune system, we're also supporting our skin. We know that the apple cider vinegar can have a mimicking effect in terms of the serotonergic pathway for cutting those cravings that people often will have, which can impede healthy weight loss. So these are the things that we now know for sure about apple cider vinegar. So we go back in time and say, okay, maybe Hippocrates had it right. Of course he did. Of course Hippocrates had it right. He recognized all the way back in BC, 400 BC, all of the ways that he could utilize this fermented acid that was coming from the apples and how he could utilize that for so many different health issues that they were seeing at that time. Now, have things changed so much now? No, certainly they have not. We still have those same types of conditions. People are still getting skin wounds. People are still having issues with respiratory health. People still have cardiovascular disease. If anything, we know that these things are much worse now because of the dietary impact that we have put ourselves into that position. So if we're following a standard American diet, we know that we're going to be more prone to things such as metabolic syndrome, such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, all of these things that we know can be neutralized if we start to have healthy lifestyle choices. And one of the ways that we can go about achieving that is not only through incorporating high fiber foods coming from things like fruits and vegetables and putting down that bag of potato chips and snacking on things such as almonds or walnuts throughout the day, but also incorporating this wonderful apple cider vinegar as part of our supplementation arsenal. And you would take this just before you have a meal, and this is going to help to support a healthy blood glucose response. This is also going to help to feed those good healthy bacteria. It's going to help to support the healthy glow of the skin, and it's going to help to support the cardiovascular system. So it makes a lot of sense. And at the same time, we know it's going to be beneficial when we look at that thermogenesis, that natural fat burning ability. So many different ways in which apple cider vinegar can be incorporated into a daily routine, so many different benefits that one can yield from it. So I definitely encourage you to go to our website and check it out. That's invitehealth.com. You can check out the apple cider vinegar formulation and consider it as part of one of your little secrets to your weight loss goals or just for overall health and wellness. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Make sure that you subscribe and that you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.